The girl was tied to a fence in the blizzard by her cruel in-laws until the rancher rode in. She comes with me. Kansas, winter of 1886. The prairie lay buried under a sky of ice, and the wind screamed like something alive. The storm had been building all afternoon, rolling across the flatlands with a force that swallowed the horizon. By nightfall, the world was reduced to white void and whirling snow, a place where even sound seemed to freeze before it could travel. Ruth Marin could feel none of it clearly anymore. Her wrists were tied tight to the rough wooden fence posts, rope digging so deep into her skin she no longer knew if the warmth leaking down her hands was blood or melted ice. Her hair whipped across her face in frozen strands. Every breath burned like glass. Behind her, the silhouettes of her in-laws faded into the swirling storm. Jonah Marin's mother had only one sentence as she turned away. "God will judge you, Ruth. We wash our hands of this." Ruth tried to shout after them. "I did not poison him. He was sick for weeks. You know he was sick. Please, please do not leave me here." But the wind swallowed her voice whole. The heavy footfalls of the Marins receded, muffled by the rising shriek of the storm. They did not look back. The fence creaked beneath the force of the blizzard, and Ruth felt her legs weakening. Snow piled against her skirt, climbing higher with every gust. Each inhale brought less air, more pain. Her voice cracked. "Somebody, anyone, please." But only the storm answered. Her eyes blurred, lashes crusted with ice. The cold crawled deeper, numbing everything except the terror in her chest. She thought of her classroom, the children she once taught, the tiny chalkboard she had saved money to buy. She thought of her husband before grief hollowed him out, before the drinking, before the final silence of his chest. And she wondered if this was really how her story ended, buried in snow, condemned by the very people she had tried to love. Miles away, Declan Pike tugged his coat collar higher as he walked the fence line of his ranch. Most nights he would have stayed inside, but tonight something gnawed at him, a strange rhythm in the wind, a break in the storm's howl that did not sound like nature. He paused near the north line, one gloved hand resting on the post. The world roared with white fury, and yet, beneath it, a sound, a thin, desperate cry carried by the wind, flickering in and out like a dying lantern. Declan turned his head, listening harder. His half-blind left eye watered from the cold, but his right eye remained sharp, narrowed toward the sound. "That is no coyote," he muttered. He whistled sharply. His horse, Bramble, trotted through the drifts with a snort of steam. Declan swung into the saddle and urged the gelding forward, leaning low as he scanned the storm-thickened dark. Another cry, fainter now. "Hold on," he murmured, into the storm, though he did not yet know to whom. A broken fence line appeared ahead, half buried. Then something moved, just barely, against the post. A figure slumped sideways, hair frozen to her cheek, rope stiff with ice. Declan's heart lurched. "Hell," he whispered. "Someone left you to die out here." He dismounted before Bramble fully stopped, crunching through the snow. The woman did not react as he lifted her face gently. Her skin was blue at the edges, her lips cracked, her eyes half open but unfocused. He spoke softly, bending close so his voice could reach her through the storm. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her mouth trembled. One broken whisper escaped. "Please." Declan drew his knife, sawed through the frozen rope, and caught her limp body as it fell forward into his arms. She was light, too light, her body shaking uncontrollably despite how cold she must already be. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and held her against his chest. "I have got you," he said, voice steady as stone. "I am taking you home." He lifted her onto the horse, mounting behind her to keep her upright, shielding her from the wind with his own body. As he turned Bramble toward the faint glow of his cabin lanterns far across the prairie, Ruth's head rested weakly against him. For the first time that night, he felt her breathe, and it was enough. He pressed his heels to Bramble's flanks. "Hold on, miss," he whispered into her hair as the blizzard howled around them. "You are not dying out here tonight. Not while I am still breathing. Declan kicked the door open with his boot, holding Ruth close to his chest. The storm screamed behind him, trying to claw its way inside. But once he shut the door, the world outside fell away to a heavy, muffled hush. He moved fast, laid her down on the cot near the fire, stripped off her frozen boots and gloves, fingers numb from handling the ropes. Her skin was pale, blue in places, the signs of frostbite already crawling up her hands. He stoked the fire high, tossed in kindling, then more logs. The warmth rose slowly, like a breath returning to a dead room. Declan peeled off his coat, then grabbed a pot and filled it with water. He threw in oats, dried apples, a pinch of salt. As the stew simmered, he rummaged through the worn wooden chest beneath the window. Inside, beneath bundles of cloth, were the last of his mother's supplies, old remedies, dried herbs, salves in tin boxes marked in shaky handwriting. "Best I can do," he muttered. He soaked cloths in warm water, gently pressed them to her hands and feet. She flinched even in her unconscious state. Her lips moved without sound. "Easy now," he whispered, as if she could hear him. An hour passed. Then another. He sat beside her, eyes trained on the slow rise and fall of her chest. When she finally stirred, it was sudden. Her eyes flew open, wide, wild. She gasped and scrambled back against the wall, clutching the blanket to her chest like it could stop bullets. "Where am I? What did you do to me?" Declan raised his hands slowly, calm as stone. "You are safe," he said. "No one here wants to hurt you." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice raw. "They sent you, didn't they?" "No," Declan said. "I do not know who they are. I found you near the fence, half frozen. That is all." She looked around, breathing hard. Her eyes landed on the fire, the pot, the tiny cabin with its single window and creaking roof. He stood up, gave her space. "If you want to go, I won't stop you. But out there, it's death tonight. You'll freeze before you get 20 paces." Ruth stared at the door, her jaw tightened. Then she lowered her head. "They said I poisoned him," she said. Her voice was low now, almost a whisper. "Said I fed him something wrong. He was sick for weeks, and I tried everything I could. But when he died, they needed someone to blame." "Your husband?" She nodded once. "Samuel Marin. His family never liked me, thought I was too proud because I used to teach. After he died, they turned on me like wolves, and when I asked for my things, they tied me to that damn fence." Declan said nothing for a long while. The only sound was the crackling fire and the faint hiss of snow hitting the windows. Then he spoke. "People will believe what suits them. I lost a brother once to something like that. A lie got told, and no one cared if it was true." She glanced at him. For the first time, she noticed his left eye, the faint cloud over it, the scar running along his cheek. "They tried to shoot me too," Declan said. "Didn't finish the job, but they took enough." The silence between them softened. He poured some of the porridge into a tin bowl and set it down in front of her. "I can't promise much," he said, "but the food is hot, and the roof holds." Ruth didn't thank him, but she reached slowly for the spoon. Outside, the storm howled on. Inside, for the first time in days, Ruth ate. And Declan Pike sat across from her, one-eyed and quiet, as the firelight flickered between them, two souls scarred by false accusations, learning to breathe in the same space. The blizzard passed, but the cold remained. Days trickled by inside Declan Pike's cabin like slow drops from a thawing icicle. Ruth regained color in her cheeks, though she still limped from the frostbite. Declan never pried. He fixed fences by day and cooked beans or rabbit stew by night. Their words were few, but something began to settle between them, like snow hardening into the ground. Until the rumors came. Declan first heard it from a trader who stopped by his fence line, exchanging bullets for cornmeal. "You hear about the Marin girl," the man muttered. "Word is she killed her husband, then took off with some old rancher. Folks say she's got him wrapped around her finger." Declan said nothing, just tightened his grip on the bag. That night, Ruth sat by the fire, stitching the sleeve of a shirt. Declan stirred a pot slowly, his good eye focused on the flickering flame. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, until a knock shattered it. 3 fists, firm, official. Declan opened the door, slow and steady. 2 men stood outside. One wore a deputy's badge under a snow-stained coat. The other, a tall man with a hat too clean for the frontier, stepped forward with a leather-bound folder. "Declan Pike?" he asked. Declan nodded once. "We are here under order from the county court. This concerns Ruth Marin." Behind them, Ruth rose to her feet. Her face went pale, then stiff with resolve. "I'm Ruth Marin," she said. "I'm not hiding." The man in the clean hat stepped inside uninvited. "Name's Thorne. I represent the Marin family's legal interest. This woman is suspected of poisoning her husband, Samuel Marin, and fleeing custody. Her sudden disappearance and your hospitality have only strengthened the case." "She was never in custody," Declan said evenly. "She was left tied to a fence in a blizzard." Thorne ignored him. He turned to Ruth. "You'll need to come with us. You'll have a chance to speak for yourself in front of a judge." Ruth looked at Declan, then back at the fire. "I'll go," she said softly. "I won't drag someone else through my mess." Declan stepped forward, blocking Thorne's path. "She's not going anywhere tonight." Thorne's brow lifted. "Are you obstructing a legal order, Mr. Pike?" "Not yet, but there's no warrant, no arrest order, only accusations and slander. If she chooses to stay here, that's her right, unless you got something in writing that says otherwise." The deputy shifted uneasily. "We don't have jurisdiction to take her by force, not without a signed order." Thorne's voice sharpened. "You're making a mistake, Pike. This woman will bring nothing but ruin. Ask around. She spins tales, weaves sympathy, then leaves men like you in ashes." Declan didn't blink. "You done talking?" Thorne narrowed his eyes, pulled out a folded paper. "Then, consider this, a court summons. She has 5 days to appear. If she doesn't, we return, with force." He threw the paper on the floor and left, his boots crunching over snow as he stormed out into the cold. The deputy paused at the door, his voice quieter. "Don't let them corner you. Justice in this town ain't always justice." When the cabin door shut again, silence fell heavy. Ruth stood frozen, staring at the paper. "I knew it would catch up. I should have never stayed." Declan poured her a cup of hot tea and set it down beside her. "They can say what they want," he said. "But here, you're not a fugitive. You're just a woman trying to survive." Ruth lowered herself to the chair, her hands trembling. "No one stood up for me like that," she whispered. "Not since, before Sam died." Declan sat across from her, the firelight catching the line of the scar down his cheek. "Then maybe it's about time someone did." Outside, the wind picked up again, but inside the cabin, the storm had shifted. For Ruth, protection no longer felt like a borrowed kindness. It was something earned, something real. And it had a name now, Declan Pike. By the 4th morning, Ruth had begun to rise before the sun. Declan never asked her to help, but she did anyway, sweeping ash from the stove, hauling water from the well, folding blankets. Her movements were quiet, methodical, like someone who'd known responsibility too long to put it down. There was a small boy from a neighboring ranch, Emmett, who'd wander in sometimes to deliver messages or bring eggs. One day, Ruth caught him tracing letters in the dirt with a stick. She squatted beside him. "That's an E," she said gently. The boy blinked. "My pa says schools for folks in towns." "Well," Ruth smiled faintly, "I used to run one in a town, a little town, but it had books, chalkboards, a bell, even." She picked up the stick and drew an A beside his shaky E. "Want to learn a few more?" From that morning on, Emmett came by more often, and not just with eggs. Declan noticed from afar. He never interrupted, just watched from the edge of the barn, arms crossed, as Ruth knelt beside the child, tracing letters with pine needles, or drawing numbers in the frost on the window pane. She didn't smile often, but when she did, Like when Emmett got the word pony right, it lit something in her eyes. He also saw her laugh, for the first time, that afternoon with the bay mare. The horse had just foaled and was skittish, refusing to let the baby nurse. Ruth approached without fear, talking low and soft like she might with a frightened child. "I know it hurts," she murmured to the mare, "but you have to let her try." Declan leaned on the post, arms folded, silent. Ruth looked over her shoulder when the mare finally allowed the foal to nuzzle in. Her smile met his gaze and held for a second longer than necessary. That evening, as snow fell in slow, lazy flakes outside, Ruth sat by the fire stitching the same torn sleeve. Declan was cleaning a rifle near the hearth, his one good eye focused. She spoke without looking up. "Why do you live alone?" Declan didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, but she didn't fill it. Eventually he said, "There was someone, a long time ago." Ruth paused her stitching. "We were engaged," he continued. "She believed I'd done something I hadn't. Someone accused me of stealing a horse. I took the fall to protect a boy who couldn't read, didn't understand the charges, got into a fight over it. A man drew first. I shot second. Got this in return." He tapped the faded scar, running from brow to cheek. "She left?" Ruth asked softly. "She left," Declan said, "and I figured maybe it was better for everyone." The fire cracked. Ruth set her sewing aside. "So you know what it feels like, to be blamed, to have your truth dismissed." He didn't nod, but he didn't need to. "I was just trying to keep Samuel alive," she said, voice low. "He got sick from the well water. I boiled herbs, begged him to rest. His parents said I was poisoning him. They said I wanted the land." Her hands trembled. Declan poured her tea, set it gently beside her. No words, no judgment. That night, the wind howled outside the windows. Ruth didn't retreat early. Instead, she stayed by the fire, knees pulled to her chest beneath the quilt. Declan sat across from her, the chair creaking under his weight. They didn't speak, didn't need to. There was a stillness in the room, not awkward, not cold, but heavy with understanding. Two people wronged by the world, carrying bruises that didn't always show. Neither asked for comfort, but both, in their silence, offered it anyway. In that flickering half-light, something began to shift. Not love, not yet, but the kind of respect that stays, that says, "I see your scars, and I will not turn away." It was on a quiet morning, with frost clinging to the window panes like lace, that Ruth stood by the stove and said, almost to herself, "He wrote a letter." Declan, seated at the table, looked up from oiling his saddle straps. "Who did?" "Samuel, my husband. Before he..." Her voice wavered. "I saw him writing it the night before he died, folded it, sealed it in an envelope. I asked him what it was, and he said, something to make it right. But his parents, after they blamed me, they never gave me anything, said there was no note." Declan's gaze sharpened. "Are you sure?" "I saw the letter." He tucked it into his coat pocket, the gray one, with the broken button. Declan stood. "Was it still there?" "No. When they brought me into town for questioning, I asked. They said there was no letter. But I think," she swallowed, "I think he kept a few things behind the loose floorboard in the barn. He used to hide tobacco there." Declan didn't speak. He simply pulled on his coat. That night, under a moon veiled by clouds, they rode out together, cloaked in darkness. The Marin house stood quiet, windows blackened. Snow crunched under their boots as they moved toward the old barn behind the main house. Ruth led the way, breath coming in soft clouds. She paused at the back wall. "Here," she whispered, kneeling. Her fingers scraped against the aged wood. "There's a board that shifts. He used to pry it up with a horseshoe." Declan passed her his knife. With care, she slid the blade into the seam and lifted. The board creaked. Behind it, wrapped in wax paper, was a small tin box. Ruth's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside were several folded letters, brittle and yellowing. One bore her name. She tore it open. Declan turned his back, giving her a moment of privacy, but he could hear her breath break. The note was short, Ink faded in places, but every word cut clear. Ruth, I'm sorry I haven't been stronger. This isn't your fault. You tried harder than anyone. It's me. I'm hollow inside, and I don't know how to be a husband when I feel like I failed before I began. The doctor said it. I can't give you children. I thought I could live with it, but I can't. You deserve a family. Please, forgive me. Tell them it was me, but they won't listen. Maybe, someday, someone will. Love always. Samuel. Ruth sat in the straw, the letter clutched to her chest. Her shoulders shook. She gasped. I thought maybe I drove him to. I thought if I'd just said the right thing, been quieter, kinder. Declan stepped forward, crouched beside her. His voice was low, steady. You never deserved what they did to you. They called me poison, she whispered. Said I tricked him into marrying me, that I was greedy, barren. Declan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She did not flinch. You are not the villain of this story. Tears streaked her wind-reddened cheeks. I was a teacher. I had a quiet life. Then he came to the schoolhouse one afternoon, asking about books on crops. He smiled. He listened. I thought, maybe he saw me. He did, Declan said, but he didn't know how to carry his own weight. Ruth shook her head slowly. I carried both of us until I couldn't anymore. And still, you didn't break, Declan said. She looked at him then, eyes wide. The firelight from his lantern caught in the tears on her lashes. This changes everything, she whispered. Yes, Declan replied. Now let's bring the truth into the light. He held out a hand. For a long second, she stared at it, then took it. Not for rescue, for strength. And together, they stood. The courtroom in Ash Creek was a modest wooden building, no grander than the saloons or mercantile shops flanking its sides. Snow clung to the windows, melting in uneven streaks, as townsfolk crowded inside, whispering with the thrill of small-town scandal. At the center sat Ruth, her posture rigid, jaw set, the folded letter clutched in her gloved hands. Declan sat one row behind her, silent, unreadable as ever, save for the muscle ticking in his jaw. Across from them, the Marins. Walter and Cora Marin sat like stone carvings, hard, unmoved, and eager to see her fall. Their lawyer, a slick man with greased-back hair and polished boots, stood as the hearing began. She is accused, the lawyer intoned, of criminal negligence, and by suspicion of murder through poison. She fled her home, destroyed evidence, and now hides with a man known for lawless dealing. Ruth's hand tightened around the letter. The judge, a grizzled man named Cartwright, nodded. And what evidence do you have to support this? Only circumstantial, the lawyer admitted, but compelling. Her husband died suddenly. His health had been failing, yes, but he worsened rapidly after their arguments. There was no physician present. The body was cremated, per her insistence. That's a lie, Ruth said, standing. It was the Marins who insisted on cremation. I begged them to wait. They refused. Do you have proof of that? She raised the letter. I have this. The lawyer scoffed. A letter, Your Honor. Forged, no doubt. Anyone can write a sob story. Let me see it, the judge said. Ruth stepped forward, hands trembling slightly as she offered the note. The judge read it in silence. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Walter Marin barked, That don't mean nothing. My son was weak. He was always dramatic. Probably wrote that to cover her tracks. Declan rose slowly from his seat. If I may, he said, voice deep and steady, I have something to add. The judge motioned him forward. Declan met his eyes squarely. My name's Declan Pike. I've kept journals for years. The handwriting in that letter matches entries Samuel Marin made in a ledger I found when he visited my ranch for fence repairs last spring. I didn't know what it was back then. Now I do. You a handwriting expert? The lawyer asked, sneering. I know what I see, and I'll testify under oath. Hell, I'll bring the book here and let every man in this room compare it themselves. There was a murmur of agreement from the gallery. The judge tapped his gavel once. The lawyer floundered. Even if the letter's his, there's no signature, no date. Declan raised an eyebrow. You want truth or technicalities? The judge looked from Ruth to the Marins, then back at the letter. I find the content consistent with a man in despair. I also find no evidence, none, that Miss Marin acted with malice. He turned to the sheriff. Release the hold on her. No charges will be pursued unless new evidence arises. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was over. But the silence that followed was not triumphant. It was heavy. Outside, as the crowd dispersed and the wind kicked snow along the boardwalk, Ruth stood alone for a moment. Then Declan joined her. She didn't look at him when she said, "They still think I did it." The town, the whispers. He didn't argue. "I'm not in jail," she said softly, "but I've still got nowhere to go." Declan glanced at the road ahead, then at her. "Then maybe this is where you start again." She looked up. "The ranch?" He shrugged. "I've got space. You've got strength. There's a schoolhouse foundation still standing near the creek. Maybe someone ought to bring it back." Her eyes shimmered. "You'd let me stay." "I'm not letting you," he said, voice gentle. "I'm asking you to." And for the first time since the snow took everything, Ruth felt the warmth of something she had almost forgotten. Belonging. The old goat shed stood on the edge of Declan's property, half collapsed from years of wind and snow, but with some elbow grease, fresh planks, and Ruth's stubborn insistence, it was transformed. By early spring, it became a makeshift schoolhouse, 4 benches, a stove, and a slate board nailed to the far wall. Word spread slowly through the outlying homesteads. The widow teacher was offering lessons. At first, only 2 children came. Skeptical mothers waited nearby, arms crossed, watching Ruth like a hawk. The Marin name still carried shadows, but Ruth never brought up the past. She greeted each child by name, handed out pencils she'd carved herself, and read aloud from old primers until the children leaned closer to listen. By the 2nd week, 6 more arrived. By the 4th, there wasn't enough bench space. On one wind-washed morning, Ruth stood before the class, chalk in hand, smiling for no one in particular. She didn't even realize it until one of the little boys, a shy redhead named Eli, asked, "Miss Ruth, are you happy now?" She paused, touched her chest, then nodded. "I think I am." After the children left, she stayed behind to sweep the dusty floor. The door creaked open again. Declan stood there, holding a small leather ledger. "I was wondering if you'd take a look at this," he said, voice softer than usual. She dusted her palms. "Your ranch books?" He nodded. "Reckon I've never been much good with numbers. Too many calves, too few coins." Ruth smiled. "You're doing fine, but you do it better." He placed the book in her hands, his fingers grazing hers for the briefest moment. They sat by the stove, Ruth flipping through the pages, pointing at entries he hadn't balanced. He didn't speak much, only nodded, occasionally asked a question he probably already knew the answer to. By the end of the hour, the figures were clearer, and so was something else. "You didn't come just for the math," she said quietly. Declan looked away, then back. "No," he admitted. They sat in the soft hush of the near evening, the wind tapping gently against the shutters. Ruth closed the book, placed it beside her. "You don't need to say anything," she whispered. Declan gave a small nod, but Ruth reached over anyway, laying her hand over his. "I used to think silence meant indifference. Now I know better." He looked at her, and this time, he didn't look away. The sky that morning was gray, not from snow, but from the kind of clouds that warned of storms made by men, not weather. Heavy, watchful, brewing silence. Ruth was sweeping the schoolhouse porch when she saw them. 6 men on horseback, coats flapping like flags, eyes narrowed and sharp as bayonets. Dust and snow swirled behind their boots. Leading them was Edwin Hale, a bitter cattleman with 2 sons and too much time to stir anger. His face was set like granite, the kind that cracked from pressure, not wear. "You're not licensed," Edwin barked, "teaching without law approval. It's dangerous, misleading our children." "I'm teaching them to read and count," Ruth replied calmly, though her hands trembled slightly on the broom handle. Her heart thudded under her collarbone, but her chin didn't waver. "You're trespassing on decency, is what you're doing," he snapped, spitting into the frozen dirt. A murmur ran through the children's parents, who'd come to drop off their kids. Some looked away, shamefaced. Others didn't move, their silence a kind of quiet defiance. Then came the sound of hooves, steady, sure. Declan Pike rode in slow, his dark coat dusted with frost, his presence like a wall rising from the earth. He dismounted in one smooth motion, and walked to stand between Ruth and the men. He said nothing at first, just scanned the faces until they fell quiet. Then his voice came low and even. "She comes with me." Edwin sneered. "That's no law." Declan stepped forward. "You want to move her," he said, voice like flint. "You go through me." Silence. A hawk screamed high above, and even that seemed to hush. Edwin shifted in the saddle. One of his sons nudged his horse back. Another man cleared his throat, looking at the ground. No one moved forward. After a beat, the group turned and rode off, snow crunching beneath hooves like brittle bones. Ruth hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until her lungs ached. Her fingers loosened around the broom. Later, back at the cabin, neither of them spoke about what had happened. She set the table quietly. Declan chopped wood and brought it in, fingers stiff from the cold, jaw tight with restraint. He knelt beside the stove, lighting it with practiced ease. She poured water into the kettle, her movements softer than usual. Their hands brushed. He looked up. She didn't move away. They sat together at the table as the fire crackled. Outside, the last snow was melting, dropping from the eaves like a ticking clock counting down the end of something old. Ruth reached across and placed her hand over his. Declan didn't flinch. He just turned his palm to meet hers, rough skin meeting warmth. There was no kiss, no whispered promise, only warmth, and a long, unbroken stillness. That night, the schoolhouse glowed golden through the windows, laughter of children echoing faintly inside. The snow melted from the steps, and above it all, a flock of birds wheeled across the wide Kansas sky, flying toward something new. If Ruth and Declan's story touched your heart, if you believe that even in the coldest storms, there's still a hand reaching out, then this story was meant for you. Hit that hype button if you believe in slow-burning love, quiet strength, and women who rise from the ashes. And, if you want more soulful tales of romance under the Wild West sky, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories now. Here, love always finds its way, through snow, through silence, and through every long road home. We'll see you on the next ride.